Have you ever been driving at night? You glanced out into the woods just for a second and thought you saw something staring back at you? Well, if so, imagine if what you saw wasn't your imagination. Today, while I draw one of the strangest cryptids ever reported, we're talking about the mysterious Dover demon, baby. A creature so bizarre that nearly 50 years later, nobody really agrees on what they actually saw. Unlike old Bigfoot or Loch Ness Monster, the Dover Demon isn't backed by hundreds of sightings. In fact, there are only a handful, but they all happened within about 24 hours. And somehow every eyewitness described almost the exact same thing. So, let's get into it, gang. Let's decipher who this Dover Demon's really about, huh? But our story begins way back when, April of 1977, in the small town of Dover, Massachusetts. Dover is exactly the type of place you'd expect a creepy story to come from. It's quiet, heavily wooded, and it's filled with winding back roads that get incredibly dark at night. If you've ever driven through the countryside with your headlights cutting through the darkness, you know how eerie it can feel. On the night of April 21st, 1977, a 17-year-old Bill Bartlett was driving with a few friends along Farm Street after dark. At first, everything was pretty casual. Then, Bill noticed something crawling along a stone wall beside the road. At first, he assumed it was some kind of animal, maybe a dog, maybe a deer. But as the headlights swept over, he realized it definitely wasn't. He slammed on the brakes. The creature slowly turned his big, giant, ridiculous head towards the car. Bill described it as having an enormous watermelon-shaped head, glowing orange eyes, incredibly thin arms and legs, and long fingers that wrapped around the rocks of the stone wall. Its skin wasn't covered in hair. It wasn't covered in scales. It looked almost hairless, almost like wet sandpaper is how it was described, which is a bizarre way to describe anything. I can't really even think about what that looks like. But the creature stood only about 4 feet tall. Little guy, little tiny fella. But its oversized head made it look completely unnatural. So, Bill stared at it for several seconds before driving away in complete shock. When he got home, he immediately drew what he had seen. That sketch, as you see right here, has become one of the most famous cryptid drawings ever made. What's interesting, though, is that Bill refused to change his story for decades. Even years later, he maintained that he saw something that night. Whether it was a real creature or something his brain couldn't explain, he believed what he saw, and I believe him too. Anyway, normally, that would be the end of the story. One strange sighting, one strange witness, mystery solved, potentially. Except that very night, someone else reported seeing almost the exact same creature. 15-year-old John Baxter was walking home after visiting his girlfriend. It was late, the roads were empty. As he walked down Miller Hill Road, he noticed a strange figure several feet ahead of him. At first, he thought it was another kid. Then he noticed how it moved. Instead of walking normally, it almost seemed to shuffle awkwardly. As John got closer, he realized the creature had an enormous head and incredibly long arms. It quietly crossed the road before disappearing into a wooded ravine. Curious and maybe a little braver than most people would be, John actually followed it. I mean, hey, this might be my ego talking, but I'd like to think I'd try to follow the guy too. Maybe even capture him. But anyway, imagine doing that. You're walking alone in the middle of the night, you see something that clearly isn't human, and instead of running, you chase it. What a legend. John don't give a damn about nothing. John searched the area for nearly an hour, but never found it again. Later, after hearing about Bill Bartlett's sightings, he was stunned. The description matched almost perfectly. Then came the third sighting. Jesus, this guy's everywhere. Popular individual around the Dover area, this guy is. On April 22nd, another teenager named Albie Brabham and her friend Will were driving near Springdale Avenue. They noticed a small creature standing beside the road. Abby described it as having glowing eyes and a large head. At first, she thought it might be a monkey, which honestly isn't much less terrifying if you're driving through Massachusetts, right? Monkey, Dover demon, tomato, tomato. But again, the description sounded eerily familiar. 3 separate sightings, different people, different locations within roughly 24 hours. Then nothing. No more credible sightings ever surfaced. It's almost as if whatever was there simply disappeared. So what exactly was the Dover Demon, you may be asking? That's where things get interesting, though. Some people think it was simply a young moose. But I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I haven't heard about many young moose that are hairless with gigantic heads and glowing eyes. You know, maybe I just haven't seen enough of them. Maybe they are out there. But anywho, I know it sounds ridiculous, them thinking it could potentially be a moose, but baby moose have long legs, awkward proportions, and can look surprisingly strange under headlights, allegedly. I'm not buying it. Still, that doesn't explain the huge head, or the fingers, or the glowing eyes, as we just said. Others think it may have been a hairless animal suffering from a disease. I don't know about that. Seems like a stretch. Animals with severe mange can look incredibly disturbing. Coyotes, foxes, and even bears can become nearly unrecognizable after losing their fur. But once again, none of those animals have giant oval heads or hands capable of gripping rocks. Then there are more unusual theories. Now we're talking. Some believe the Dover Demon was extraterrestrial in nature, which I think I'd subscribe to as well. Its oversized head and thin body certainly resembles the classic image of an alien. Others think it could have been an interdimensional being. Now we're talking. Now we're getting somewhere. Something that briefly appeared then vanished. Some even connect it to folklore about nature spirits or creatures that rarely reveal themselves to humans. There isn't any evidence for these ideas, but they continue to fascinate people because the sightings remain unexplained. One thing that makes this case stand out is how ordinary witnesses were. None of them were trying to become famous. None of them made money from the story. In fact, most of them seemed uncomfortable with the attention. That's one reason the Dover Demon has remained one of the most respected cryptid cases. People may disagree about what was seen, but they generally agree that the witnesses genuinely believed they experienced something unusual. Interestingly, the creature wasn't actually called the Dover Demon at first. The night came shortly after the sightings when local investigators and newspapers began covering the strange reports. The word demon wasn't meant to suggest it was a literal demon. It was simply a catchy name for something that looked unlike anything anyone could identify. But I mean, I think pretty universally the word demon comes with some pretty negative connotations. You know, cancel me, I don't know. But honestly, if you saw a creature with glowing eyes, a giant head, and fingers wrapped around a stone wall in the middle of the night, you'd probably call it something dramatic too. I know I would. But I think my name would be a lot more intense and dramatic, like the Dover's incarnation of Lucifer himself. I don't know, maybe that's a bit overboard. But anyway, over the years, the Dover Demon has become one of America's most famous cryptids, not because of hundreds of sightings, but quite the opposite, because of just a few. The mystery feels almost frozen in time. 3 witnesses, one tiny town, 24 hours, and then silence. The lack of evidence actually makes the story even stranger. There are no blurry videos, no endless conspiracies, no tourist attractions built around it, just a few eyewitnesses. One famous sketch and decades of people wondering what really happened. Personally, I think that's what makes cryptids so gangsta. Whether they're real animals, mistakes, psychological phenomena, doubt it, or stories that grew over time, they remind us that nature can still surprise us. Even today, there are thousands of species discovered every single year. The world is still full of things we don't completely understand. Does that mean the Dover Demon was real? A real unknown creature? Maybe, maybe not. Probably, though, in my opinion. But one thing is certain. For one strange weekend in 1977, something happened in the woods of Dover that left several people convinced they'd seen something impossible. And almost 50 years later, we're still talking about it. So what do you think? Was the Dover Demon an undiscovered animal, an alien, a case of mistaken identity, or something else entirely? Let me know down in the comments. And if you enjoyed hanging out while I drew today's cryptid, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, because there are plenty more strange creatures and legends coming up next, gang. And I will see you in the next one. Peace!